The Fallout 4 vanilla experience is pretty rough. You gotta be able to admit that going into this video. I remember when Fallout 4 came out. I remember it because I actually had no idea that it was even in development. See, back then developers like to keep their games a secret, and I had no interest in knowing their secrets. I have no idea why they did this, but this was a thing that people used to do. Now you hear about games 2 years before they actually start working on them. We hear about games before there's even footage of a game. We clap and cheer at logos. People, calm down. Newer Bethesda games aren't necessarily bad games, and every game has its flaws, but sometimes there's just this one thing that's so bad that, well, let's just say it's a lot like those weight loss commercials you used to see with the before and afters. Before I turned off the Molotovs and grenades, my family said they didn't like who I was becoming. But now that I've downloaded the Molotov remover mod, I can smile again. A lot of you have been asking for this video, and by a lot of you, I really mean one guy has been posting about Fallout 4 on every single video I've released since roughly Fallout 1. Quote, "This video was good, but it's still not Fallout 4. Some of you may be wondering why I haven't done this video sooner. Why is it taking me this long to do a video on a game that has over 600 million available impressions according to Google, and instead chose to do Prey with its meager 1 million? Why? Because, well, I mean, have you ever played this game? The reality is I was dreading doing this video. The first time I played the game, I played it for about 20 hours and I put it down forever. I was so bored with the story, the settlement stuff, the combat, which ranges from easy to feeling like you're chipping paint off the wall with your fingernails, and the obtuseness of the leveling system. All of this combined to make me dread doing a video on Fallout 4. All of this changed the moment I started playing the game on survival difficulty, however, and everything started to click into place, even though Bethesda's default game mode did its level best to push me away. But I eventually fixed it. So let's dig in, shall we?
War never changes. When the US ended World War II by dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima.
I made a female character. I wanted her to look like somebody specific, but instead all I could do is make slightly deformed versions of the base model. Instead, what I ended up making was this thing. I'm calling it human.
Human?
No, human. Lyudmila is a lot like her previous manifestation. I focused on long range and would like to focus on crits, but there's so many points to put into so many other places that it seemed like I wouldn't have the build I wanted until like level 500. Also, I never noticed how rough Nate looks my first time through. He's got that hug me body, but that face has traveled many a long road and it seems the tires left tread marks. In fact, well, everybody looks like this. Like, you know, fake, but not an acceptable level of fake, but like a level of fake that makes you cringe. I picture the Uncanny Valley to be like the point where two lines intersect. One line is graphical fidelity and the other is animation quality, right? And as the graphical fidelity of Fallout 4 gets higher, the animation stays stagnant and the combination just makes my eyes bleed. Some of these people are mutant level freak show scary. Not even the ginned up door-to-door salesman can escape the jank. This opening felt odd the first time I played it. Like, it was obvious that Bethesda wasn't happy to just repeat what they had done before, and were looking to push the edges a bit further out, and I think they deserve at least some recognition for trying something new. The issue is, well, it just seems like Bethesda's getting worse at just about everything else. Quality control wise, I mean, first, let me preface this by dispelling a few rumors. I think a lot of people don't understand what QA actually does. Perhaps too many people are basing their knowledge on grandma's boy. I don't know. QA is not just about bugs. They report to supervisors who usually sit in design meetings, so sometimes they'll provide feedback on gameplay features. Something's too hard or something's too complicated, that kind of thing. Hell, they might even report on things that don't logically make sense, like the flow of character creation. Here's the thing though. QA might not be thinking from the perspective of a player because they're thinking from the perspective of a person who's put hundreds of hours into the game because it's literally their job to do so. My point is, this is why a lot of AAA studios do user experience testing, so the user can add their input before the game has gone gold and orders have been sent to the presses. You get what I'm saying? I'm saying that I don't believe Bethesda does any of this, and the whole process of building a game there must be so convoluted that we're lucky that we get anything that works at all. Don't believe me? Look at Fallout 76 and tell me I'm wrong. Alright, think about it this way. If QA were testing this thing like a new player would, instead of skipping the intro and so on, by their 15th new character, they would have looked at Todd Howard and said, "Mate, there's no way we could put our players through this intro, it's boring. You spend most of the time waiting around for the next event to trigger, waiting for someone to finish talking to the neighbor so you can create your character, then waiting some more before your door will open, then you're forced to run in the only direction that you can or you'll die, then go through a long, horribly linear tutorial section before we're given any sort of freedom, before we realize we fucked up our character and need to reload a save."
It just works.
No, I'm saying it doesn't work.
It just works.
You're not understanding. Alright, so this is the perfect time to talk about the character creation sheet. Now, my first time through here, I looked at this thing and I said, let's see what we got here. Okay, what do these stats actually do? And where are all the skills at? At this point, I started hyperventilating when I first played the game. My OCD kicked in and suddenly I was sweating. This thing sucks. Why does it suck? Well, just like all the previous Bethesda titles that have released in the Fallout universe, Bethesda seems keen to hide info from you when you need it the most. I mean, at least you can make a black Liam Neeson in Fallout 3.
You can do it.
I just have to ask a question. Why can't I fill out my character sheet like a normal game? Why is it necessary to make me sit and wait to play the game I bought rather than go through all this, then put me into a point of no return at the elevator? You can't exit this screen. So if you didn't check the perk sheet that you likely didn't know even existed your first time through, you would be stuck with the choices you made because the game doesn't show you the results of the choice you made, and worse yet, you can't exit the screen and back away from the elevator to check the screen in case you made a mistake. I, on the other hand, decided to tab out of my game. And damn, what a mistake that was! When you come back to the screen, you have to roll a 20-sided die to determine if your screen looks like this. So there it is, people. Not even out of the intro of the game, and I've already hit a bug. I was forced to quit. Now, on any other level of difficulty, this would be fine. Load your save from before you got on the elevator, problem solved. Well, I'm playing on survival difficulty. Why is survival a problem? Because you can only save when you're sleeping or if you quit the game. That quitting the game thing can be quite a problem because sometimes the game will crash on exit. Joy. As to the question, why am I playing on survival? Well, I guess that needs some explaining too. Short answer is it's the only bearable way to play the game, and I know a lot of you out there are saying, are you insane? Trust me, it's true, but only after you make some modifications. The long answer, survival rebalances the damage in the game. In the beginning of the game, you'll be dying to a single shot from a Red Ryder BB gun, but so will the enemy. It's actually a great system because at level 9, you'll outlevel the damage rebalance and become a god, and I can show you how to do that, but don't let me get too far ahead of myself. If I were to play this game on very hard, enemies would be bullet sponges who take more bullets to kill than exist in the world. Easy mode does the opposite. You're a god who can finger blast other gods to death. The issue is, legendary enemies are rarer on the easier difficulty, which means no legendary loot. Lame. No thanks. Survival ends up being the perfect balance, and if it weren't for all the limitations in the game, this is what I would comfortably call normal difficulty. It's weird. Really, when you think about it, Bethesda games require all this modding to make them good because Bethesda doesn't give the player enough options on how to play the game. They're too restrictive with their rules, so people end up having to mod the rules out. All these things I mentioned about the game, they could have been options that you could toggle in the menu. Don't like this feature? Turn it off. I mean, that's essentially what mods do. You're going to see this a lot throughout this review because when I acknowledge a problem in the game, I also check to see if the community has fixed that problem for Bethesda. I'm almost 100% sure this is true across the board because Bethesda has a very loyal fan base of dedicated modders, and when a company shits the bed, the community comes to squeegee off the mattress. Corporate socialism to the rescue! The first place you'll likely see is the town you were in before everyone had their shadows burnt into the concrete. This bit of design is interesting. Kind of textbook, really. If you want the player to go anywhere first upon starting your game, make sure they're pointing towards that thing in some way. And make sure that what you want them to see is visible. And it's a good thing they designed it this way because going anywhere else on this difficulty will result in one-shots all day long from the raider with the dog or literally anyone with a gun. Dirty secret time. I built about 7 different characters for this review. I tried a straight up rifle build, gave up on it around level 15, tried out a melee character, dropped that shit at level 9. Then at some point I started a rifle build, figured out how I can get a rifle with a silencer, then something clicked. I can double up my damage that way. Let me tell you the story of Leadmilla. As soon as I exited the vault, I went to my old house, and my robot was still there, and worse yet, still operating. I mean, this thing runs on fuel, you know, gas, shit like that. It's been 200 years. How is this thing still running on the same tank of gas that was sitting in the house? I mean, I want you to think about how this little tiny goddamn thing in this 80-hour game breaks all the lore built up over 20 years. Here's the lore.
War never changes.
And because it never changes, America went to war with the Chinese over natural resources, okay? Oil, minerals, eerily reflective of what's going on today. Anyway, we were running out of dinosaur bones and needed them to power our Humvees and Mr. Handy robots. I mean, so was there ever a game in the OG Fallout series where these Mr. Handy things were ever used for anything other than military applications? Maybe they might have sewed one or two guys up in a hospital, but I don't remember ever seeing these things outside of a military facility. I know the wiki says otherwise, but I still wonder about it. You only ever saw these things in old military facilities or in the wreckage of a military vertebrate crash. If I'm remembering all this stuff clearly and my brain hasn't stroked out on me, what I'm saying is that these things were meant for killing and for operating on people in hospitals and building and maybe construction. These things weren't nannies until part 4 as far as I know.
There will come soft rains and the smell of the ground and swallows circling with their shimmering sound.
I think it's meant to be a joke in search of lore to justify it. I could put that criticism aside. It's a very Bethesda attempt at humor, I get it. The kid won't stop crying no matter what I do.
Sean has been changed, but he absolutely refuses to calm down.
Sleep, little dumpling. I have replaced your mother.
I get it. It's hilarious. But the fuel thing, that's where I draw the goddamn line. Where is he getting the fuel to hover there? Where? Tell me. He's not getting it from the gas station up the street because that place has been infested with mole rats and hasn't seen a fuel delivery in 200 years. Maybe, okay, hear me out. Maybe the robots were just so efficient that they never needed a refuel. Okay. Let's grant this for a moment. Then why was there a shortage of fuel and natural resources in the first place? If these things were so efficient that they could run on a tank of gas and just run on and on and on, then why were we so worried about oil? I mean, this robot survived 200 years on a single tank of gas. Do you know what that means for technology? There would be national hero medals given out to whoever invented this technology. And those are flames coming out of them, okay? And this is a gas tank for Mr. Handies, so don't give me that nuclear power shit, that's not what's going on here. These people want us to believe that this thing exposed to the elements, never getting any form of maintenance, would be able to survive 200 years without a refuel. No, I refuse to believe it. I know that I'm criticizing this game for stuff that it pulled from Fallout 1 that was just as ridiculous, but here's the thing, it was more believable in the OG Fallout games because you really only saw these robots operating in places where they could feasibly run on their own, like military facilities that still had power. How did they still have power? They probably had a generator somewhere that was running on nuclear power because that's kind of the lore of the game, right? And they could have feasibly went and recharged themselves. But in Fallout 4, it literally tries to explain to you where the fuel comes from. By over-explaining, it actually makes the lore worse. And by explaining this thing, they've demystified it, you know? The lack of information before in the previous games was part of the charm and wonder of the game. So I'm not really looking for an explanation, I'm looking for less explanation. And if you're gonna create more explanation, then you better explain it well. And I wouldn't care normally, but this happens the first 30 minutes in the game. And if you think that's bad,
You think that's bad?
wait till we get to the story. Even my character seems surprised that Codsworth is still here. So Codsworth tries to trick me into helping him with a side quest that he didn't feel like doing himself, and I agree to help him, but I don't help him. I would normally leave him to do it himself because he's invincible, and also screw him. I'm a human. I don't work for robots. Yet.
I am fully operational, Captain.
Robots are the reason Leah Miller lost her job in a circumcision racket. I mean, there was a time when a girl could make good money off of foreskin. After the robots took over, she was forced to become a lawyer. On the other hand, we need the experience. I needed as much of a HP advantage for the next mission as soon as possible, and since Bethesda most likely meant for players to spend a large chunk of time here, I figured I'd hang around for a while and see how much XP I could gobble up. Once we killed all the bugs, I got to level up. I went with Idiot Savant. I figured level 2 was the perfect time to pick it, since I get to keep that XP bonus going through the rest of the game, giving me a level advantage early on. This would have worked even better with a 1 in intelligence, but that would lock me out of gun nut, which allows me to modify weapons. So some of you might be under the impression that Idiot Savant is not worth taking. Well, you're just wrong. Idiot Savant will proc during any event, which gives you experience. Did you build a wall? Good for you. Here's 5 times the XP bonus. Did you make some steak? Have some extra XP. Did you find a new point of interest? Did you finish a quest? Well, prepare to sit for 15 minutes watching your level slowly climb as your character licks the Nilla wafers off the roof of his mouth. Just outside the station, I see some bugs sucking on a cow carcass. And in this clip, you'll see why you always go lone wanderer. The problem being that the companions are stupid at best, dangerous to you at worst, and because they have full collisions and you can't simply pass through them, not only do they get in your way, but if you're standing in the way of an enemy they want to shoot, guess who gets shot? You do! If you're not watching them carefully, you'll find them standing idly by, watching raiders run a train on you while your companion licks salt off of rocks. Let's say you're in a room with only one exit, and you're cornered, and you need to run out that door. Well, this is likely where your companions will be, blocking your only exit, trying to run inside while you're trying to run out. Working as intended. You know what would have been great to change about VATS that actually would have fixed a lot of this? Treat VATS tactically. Like, if you're going to improve a system, you don't improve it by gimping the good feature, you add more. Wouldn't it have been nice to be able to do the following in VATS? Spend AP to use an item. Spend AP to move the cover. Spend AP to reload your weapon before it runs dry. And best of all, use AP to assign commands to your companion, like which target to attack and which attack to use. Then if the pathfinding wasn't totally borked, this would have made not only the companions useful, and would have given VATS a nice big boost in usability if it weren't so friggin' slow. I think it goes without saying that in survival, it seems you're almost always better off not having these twits getting you killed.
I got word of a settlement that needs our help.
And everything was going great, then this happened. Oh, and there's the Molotov. Awesome. First, I took too long to choose who I wanted to attack, and because of that, I hit the door instead. Then I got whacked by a Joe Montana Molotov. Like, look at this. I duck behind this door for cover, and this guy manages to lob the Molotov without hitting the roof or the door in front of him, and instead made it through the tiny gap between to nail my ass. If you look at this, from the time the grenade icon appears, I have 40 frames to react. That's 2/3 of a second to get out of the way. Since the average reflex time for players is about 250 milliseconds, the Molotov would have already traveled far enough to kill me even if I shot it out of the sky with VATS. If the enemy wasn't allowed to throw a Molotov when they're literally standing right in front of me, then I would have never run into this problem. You have to give your player enough time to react to what's going on in front of them.
Dude, if you do that again, I'm gonna punch you. I'm not kidding.
Another thing is, if the grenade icon would have shown the moment the raider was readying a Molotov, I would have had 71 frames to react, which is more than 1 second. That should be enough for me to pop into VATS and quickly aim at the Molotov. But that should is put between heavy finger quotes, because switching targets in VATS with time still moving is not only super distracting and annoying for me, not to mention that it's hard to tell what direction the game wants you to move the stick in to target the thing you're trying to target. It's a mess. Then you put on top of all that the fact that if the enemy is too close to you, VATS will randomly decide to focus on someone 500 yards away from where you are, which is exactly what you want when you go into VATS. You want to dick around trying to find the right target while a raider's breaking a pool cue off in your ass. This is about when I installed the Molotov Remover mod, because I lost about 20 minutes of gameplay to this shit and I didn't want it happening again. On my second try, Leadmilla got through the museum once again, and this time, she did a lot better. Then she met Preston Garvey. Preston's a bit nosy, starts asking why she's there and what she's doing. She's cagey, doesn't tell him about the kid because she has no idea what the child support situation is. And the kid's been living with his dad in that cryo tank for like 200 years, you know what I mean? That's a lot of arrears. They could take your license away for that kind of shit, you know what I mean? I need that for driving.
That's called foreshadowing.
And Preston, I don't know, there's just something about this guy. Like, he over-enunciates everything like he's trying to teach a baby physics.
Another settlement has sent word that they need our help.
If you mention money, he gets all sarcastic. It's like, hey, hold up there, buckaroo. If it weren't for me, you'd be bent over the nearest table right now enjoying a tossed salad while Mama Murphy's forced to watch. Okay? I think you owe me something. Buster Scruggs over here gets involved in the conversation and tells me about power armor, then tells me there's some up there on the roof, then explains that I can rip the minigun off the vertibird. He tells me all this for what feels like 20 minutes because the dialogue goes on for far too long. The game likes to over-explain shit. It's as if they thought the casual audience they were going for wouldn't see the big-ass minigun and they would just like pass it by without even trying to interact with it. Listen, I like shooting things as much as the next guy. That doesn't mean I lick every window I see. Just the ones with handprints.
Thanks. It's good to meet someone who really cares. Anyway.
I like how it seems like Preston just gives up trying to convince us that he's seen some shit.
Anyway.
Like, I don't know about you, but when I'm pinned down by raiders in an abandoned museum, the first thing I do is tell the woman that saved me how mentally damaged I am from having seen the shit. So I go to the roof, gun down a few people's sons and daughters, and whatever this shit is.
I know I'm smiling right now, but the light inside me is dying.
Then a death claw spawns. And you know what? I'm gonna just cheese his bitch ass in this building. So I just sat here and showered this thing with 5mm rounds while it tried in vain to find a way through a wall. I mean, look at this. This shit's ridiculous. It can't find its way into the room. So what does it do? Sometimes it runs off and tries to hide. Okay, fine. But if you go outside and try to fight this thing toe to toe, you're gonna die. Really. Because the power armor's too slow to maneuver and this thing can run fast and it will catch up to you. And there's only so much that you can do to kill this thing before it does. So this is really the only way to do it. So did they design it to be done this way? Because if so, like, ugh. When I get back to Preston Garvey, he's quick to say how amazing I am. And I am. I'm amazing, like a murderous, rampaging maniac amazing. And what do I get for pumping 500 rounds of 5mm into people, places, and things? 50 fusion cells and 100 bottle caps. Wow. Thanks, Preston. Totally worth it. Then this bitch starts talking about Destiny.
More to your destiny.
Dudes and dudettes.
Don't give me that Destiny crap.
It's like Fallout has forgotten what kind of game it is. It's like Fallout's brain has a blood clot and it's hallucinating that it's a BioWare RPG.
Stroke! You telling me you can't keep an open mind after that?
What's the point of listening to you if I don't believe you? Lay off the drugs, Granny, or try something harder. Live till you die, that's my motto. Put the pedal to the floor and drive headfirst into that wall of life. I honestly hate this character so much that at this point it's sort of irrational. Notice that, for the most part, I haven't been using VATS all that much. Well, I have power armor now, and playing this game with power armor on is like role-playing as RoboCop walking into a den of drug dealers.
Come quietly or there will be trouble.
You basically have plot armor is what I'm saying. But also, VATS kinda sucks. Combat has two faces. It has the face it wants you to see, which is all the shooty bang bang stuff, and all the RPG stuff that Bethesda seems intent to hide. Some people say that the game's not really an RPG because the dialogue is bad and should feel bad about itself. Some also say that you don't really get dialogue choices because nothing you say has any impact, most of the time. And when you do get extra dialogue, you realize that 3 out of the 4 choices are exactly the same. Just download the dialogue enhancer so you can see what choices you actually have, and you'll realize that all roads lead to sarcasm.
Maybe I don't want to talk to you.
No, you do. Fuck you!
I would agree with the people who say that, but with an asterisk. These people also forget that RPGs are games, first and foremost. And dialogue, while being a way that you can express yourself in a game, is not the only way. I mean, Deus Ex had a dialogue system, but that's not why I was playing that game.
The mechs might have copper wiring to reroute your fear of pain, but I've got nerves of steel.
Okay, maybe I was. Think of 2 types of role-playing games. One type that allows you to express yourself through dialogue / personality choices, and the other type that lets you express yourself through mechanics. Fallout 4 is a different kind of RPG. It's more immersive sim on the surface with all its building mechanics, crafting systems, and city management. It seems to want to be seen as something other than the name of the game suggests. Sometimes it's actually a convincing simulation. At least it strives to be, when the engine isn't busy tripping over its own feet and busting its teeth out on the curb. And you're probably asking yourself, what, if anything, does this have to do with combat? Well, I'm getting to that. This game is largely about tactics, and you realize this about the game when you play it on survival mode. You learn that the best way to play the game is to never let the enemy get a single shot off. You learn that getting the drop on enemies who are hidden in the over-cluttered background is possible only when spamming VATS. VATS is the safest way to engage, and to see the enemy before they see you. I'm not saying that VATS is the safest way to do combat. I'm saying that it's the safest way to see enemies that you wouldn't normally see, because I used to get ambushed a lot until I started using VATS to see what's in front of me. Not to mention getting blown up by mines, but that's a different story. Because it's really hard to see what's in front of you when you got all this crap cluttered around everywhere. It's very difficult to see a raider whose clothes are exactly the same color as dried up dead twigs. You know what I mean? I went about the combat thinking that a silent sniper rifle would be the best way to proceed. I was wrong, but I had good reason to think that. You know, I didn't know much about the game, and I didn't know all the little particulars about how you aim down sights, but we're going to get to that too. I started off the game using VATS with the sniper rifle because at first it offered me the ability to get headshots, until I learned that trying to get a headshot is probably the dumbest thing you could do in this game. But with VATS, I was able to do it more reliably. And that's when the combat started to feel a little more tactical. I started aiming for different body parts in order to get different effects. So like for instance, if a melee character was trying to close distance, I might shoot him in the leg to slow him down. When you play the game this way, it's kind of wonderful. Only if you like strategy games though. And if I know anything about math, it's that 1 + 1 = 2, and there's way more shooter fans out there than there is turn-based combat fans. But like everything else in vanilla Fallout, it isn't perfect. Molotovs, man, these things are the reason my kids have insomnia, because I keep waking them up screaming whenever my run ends because someone lobbed a flying middle finger at me and there was nothing I could do about it. It's interesting that they changed VATS to have a time slowdown, and by interesting I mean stupid. It feels a bit like they decided to completely abandon RPG fans with this one, even in the combat. When you see what it did to the tactical aspect of the previous games, it doesn't even feel like it's a game in the same genre. There was, by virtue of VATS pausing combat, an emphasis on thinking about your next move. When they took that ability away in Fallout 4, I found myself missing 95% shots more often because the body part I was aiming at moved behind cover, because it took my geriatric soldier 20 minutes to actually fire his first shot, and when he did, the camera turned to him, watched him take aim, the bullet slowly exited the barrel and traveled across the landscape, careful to take in all the major sights while they were there, and when the bullet was finally tired of traveling, it would lodge itself into the nearest tree because the raider was already behind me, grinding his crotch against my neck. In old VATS, you could carefully survey your surroundings, see if anyone was sneaking up behind you, and come up with a plan before execution. But because time never stops, you never feel like you have enough time to get your bearings, because by the time you switch to all available targets, someone's already shoved a grenade into your urethra. VATS is slower now, it's dumber now, and quite frankly, it just doesn't feel good to use. It just feels like it's more fun to aim and shoot the gun yourself. And it's not like I have a problem with the direction that they're going. I don't have a problem with it being more action-oriented. I have a problem with the fact that the same level of attention and care that was given to the gunplay wasn't given to the tactical gunplay. In fact, it wasn't even improved from the previous iteration, which is the bare minimum you expect from a sequel. Okay, I feel like I should explain that. RPGs from AAA studios are meant to appeal to two totally different audiences: shooter fans and fans of dice-based games. A shooter is designed with different goals in mind than an RPG. A game like Doom is a power fantasy. Its level of challenge consists of arenas that may not make sense from a design point, like why was this place built this way? What real-world purpose does it serve? The answer is, it doesn't serve a purpose. It was designed like that so the player has interesting ways to move throughout the level. The player's success is dependent purely upon their skill and their mastery of the systems. An RPG has different priorities. It's concerned with giving the player a different kind of power fantasy. It allows people like me with average reflexes and aim to feel the same kind of adrenaline rush that FPS players feel while doing all this through another character's point of view. For my money, what makes combat in an RPG so compelling is when the tactical combat is on point, when it's difficult but gives the player autonomy to try new things with surprising results. I prefer strategy when I'm role-playing because my characters shouldn't be limited by my skill like they would be in a shooty bang bang game. The characters should be limited by their skills, like a never had sex tabletop game. So for instance, if I was making a sniper character, I may not be able to hit a shot from 300 yards, but my character might. And no matter how much practice I get, I may never be able to fulfill that role-playing goal if I'm depending on my skill to elicit that feeling. I guess you could say that RPGs make you feel like you've created a badass instead of feeling like one yourself. The character earned that feeling of accomplishment. I just pointed them in the right direction. This new bullet time VATS breaks a lot of that, because just like an arena or tactical shooter, oftentimes your success is based on how quickly you're able to target the enemy in VATS, and sometimes it's easier and faster to aim and shoot them yourself because you could fire an entire clip into an enemy in the time it takes to spend all your action points. Wouldn't it be nice to go back to a simpler time? A time when VATS actually stopped time completely so you could survey your surroundings? Let me take you back to a time when games expected you to stop and think about what you were going to do next. And by me, I mean install this mod. VATS Tweaks has an array of options, but I was only interested in turning off all the stupid ass cam shots that take a day and a half to execute and to have it pause time when entering VATS. The results were amazing. With just these simple mods, the game went from a test of my patience to, well, it became an entirely different experience. One that awarded patience and stealth with easy kills. And it's clear that the designers just assumed that you would always be hitting the VATS key. I mean, how else could you explain this? Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to see this mine because it's being covered by all this tall grass, right? So you get to thinking, like, who the hell would have ever thought this was a good idea? And you know, it's funny and everything when you die to something like that. It's funny at first, right? And I had this whole bit planned out that I thought was just super hilarious. Then I ran into this one. This mine right here, you see, is literally under the fucking ground. The only way to see this mine before it blows your ass to pieces is to be hitting the VATS key before you run it over. So while I thought long and hard about removing those mines, I didn't. Because it actually added tension to the gameplay. Like, you never knew when you were going to come around a corner and there was going to be a mine there or a tripwire. And then as soon as you ran into this thing, whether it blew you up or not, you wondered, I wonder what's around this corner that the level designer didn't want me to see. The only thing is, the other 99.999999999% of the game is spent clicking the VATS key when there's nothing around. Then you got something that's a little more, I think, controversial. My favorite feature of survival mode is how you save. Yeah, I know. Just hear me out.
People enjoyed luxuries once thought the realm of science fiction.
Preston Garvey lets us know that
I got word of a settlement that needs our help.
Being that this is survival, getting anywhere on this map will be difficult, and in general, this mission's pretty far away. First, I ran across a stone quarry, and this place has been screwed up since I first played this game back when it released. Throughout the game, you'll occasionally see these low-resolution walls and objects appear which have no collision mesh. So what happens is, you end up going through the geometry. What these meshes are is an LOD mesh that has, instead of being dropped from memory, has decided to stick around. Let's say you have a 3D mesh of a lamp. When you're within 20 feet of it, you'll see all these intricate details, both modeled and textured, and that's because right now, you're seeing the highest detail version of that model. The further away you get from the mesh, the more that detail is chopped down until what you're looking at is this incomprehensible mess, or in some cases, a 2D plane with a transparent texture. But since you're so far away, it doesn't matter, because the further away something is from you, the smaller the pixel count is on the screen. Basically, it's impossible to show more detail, so why not cut down the poly counts and the texture resolution? Like, for example, you didn't even notice that way off there in the background, that there was an image there. You can't tell what it is, but it's two guys kissing. Now, you can't see it, so I'm going to describe it to you. One guy's really into it, right? He's like grabbing a dude behind his head, you know, and like trying to get his tongue way down in there. And the other guy looks like he's about to start laughing. Like he was only there because he really needed the money, and he's kind of embarrassed. He's never kissed a dude before, and it's a little, exciting, but also embarrassing, so he's laughing, you know what I mean? I don't know why that makes it hotter. Usually all of this LOD information is stored within the object, so the transition from detail level to detail level is fairly straightforward. But from what I can see, this is not the case here, because I have no idea why this is happening, but it happens a lot. I've seen these low detail LODs everywhere, and it happens regardless of modding. The problem is so bad that someone released the LOD generator. These people spent 1.5 years of their life fixing an issue that Bethesda hasn't fixed since the game was released almost 7 friggin' years ago. Really? You released a VR version of this game years ago that has the same bugs that this version had. This is actually an easy problem to fix. All you gotta do is just go into an INI file, change a line, and you're done. Now it works. So it really makes you wonder why Bethesda didn't, do it themselves? What is this new reality we live in? Christ. Just as I make my way from Glitch Quarry, I run across a legendary doggy. Little to my knowledge, there was a feral ghoul behind me who proceeded to knock me into the puppy, who then proceeded to one-shot me, back to the save spot. And to make things worse, I've missed that shot at a legendary piece of loot, which really hurts. It hurts real bad, because those little bonuses can sometimes make the difference in a hard fight. The second time through, I managed to run across 2 raiders and almost shot my ass off, and about 50 million goddamn mole rats. I hate these things. Whenever they spawn, I just immediately jump on top of the nearest pile of garbage and enter VATS to get an idea of where everything is. And since these things are now like the worms and tremors, the name of the game is to lure them out and nail them before they can get a shot off. Trying to do this with time constantly ticking by would have been annoying or possibly deadly, so at least in this case, modding made the experience much more bearable for me. And then this friggin' guy just appears out of nowhere.
I don't, but give me your caps anyway.
I am sorry, but I don't have enough to spare.
No, asshole, you don't just get to refuse. I'm not asking to borrow your caps, I'm telling you to give them. You know what? And what do you know? The guy was lying. He had plenty to spare, including this awesome gun that I will probably use for the next 3 or 4 hours of gameplay until it runs out of ammo, that is. Full auto, at least in VATS, has the advantage over single shot weapons, because just like in Fallout 1, it can spray multiple bullets per round. Putting more lead out there can be the difference between losing and winning. I continued on towards the settlement, and I took a poorly advised shot against a distant ghoul. That was before I noticed that there were 3 of them all grouped up. They advanced, I frantically backed away from them and pulled out the old 3-shotter. This fight was actually pretty tense, because most of my fights usually end with me getting the drop on the enemy, but with these ghouls, you never have an idea of how many there are or where they're coming from until they all come running around a corner at you. And because they can close distance and stagger you, fighting them on survival gives you the same level of fear and adrenaline you get from Souls games. The fear of loss. Once a group of these douche nozzles surround you, it's pretty much game over, dudette. So I go a little further in and I see this dog all sitting by himself, so I take my shot, but what I don't know is that there's 3 more of them.
What a shame.
My strat for these guys is pretty much the same as mole rats. I find a nearby object, climb it, and hope their pathfinding fails them. Pipe rifles are kind of a pain in the ass. See, the 38 ammo, which is the most common ammo type in the game, has high AP to use and does horrible damage. So you always want to use manual aim because you want to be able to fire off rapid fire shots, right? And you can only do that by doing it manually. That's when some of Fallout 4's more glaring problems start staring you right in the face. Do you see what's happening here? I could put it on repeat for you if you want. Just take a real close look. Do you see what's going on? Why the hell would the screen go blank when you aim down sights? Why? All I need is for someone to explain to me why anyone would want to close both of their eyes before they aim down the scope of their gun. Give me one good reason why a person would want to do that, please. I timed it out, okay? It takes 35 frames for the screen to come back and for you to be able to see what the fuck you're aiming at. 35 frames or almost half a second. Remember, it doesn't take long for a Molotov cocktail to leave someone's hand and travel to your body. I mean, it's an express delivery service for sure. The Raiders are like the Uber Eats of screwing up your good time. So a half a second is a really long time to not be able to see your screen. It doesn't even make logical sense. Like, I'm pretty sure I understand why they did this. They wanted to eliminate quickscoping, but why? If quickscoping is fun to do, why would you want to limit somebody's fun? When I go out to the wiki, I'm told that the reason that this happens is because of the weight of your gun. Okay, that's fine. But the thing I don't like is the fact that the entire screen goes black. That doesn't make any sense. It would make more sense if it took you a longer amount of time to pull the scope up to your body and your head. That I can understand. At least then I could still see my surroundings. I could still see what's going on around me. You get it? In a game that's all about the shooty bang bang stuff, you know, the most important thing is being able to see what's going on around you. That's why shooter fans always increase their FOV until, you know, they look like they have goat eyes and they can see everything on the sides and behind them, you know? There's a reason. Also, before I forget to mention, you know, the time to kill in survival mode is super low, so if you're caught out in the open trying to aim down sights for more than 2 seconds, the chances are you're gonna be dead. If that doesn't sound bad to you, how about losing your peripheral vision when you're aiming down a scope? I mean, does that make sense to you? I mean, if you're in a firefight, do you want to be able to see your flank? Pro shooters will always tell you that you got to keep both of your eyes open when you're aiming down sights. Closing one eye, it limits your depth perception, which is, you know, kind of what you need when you're trying to hit something in the distance. It may not feel natural to do, but that's what you're supposed to do. And while I don't know how you feel about this aiming system in this game, I know that I friggin' hate it. So I downloaded the Better Scopes mod, which takes away that whole black filter that goes over the screen, and it looks like it takes it away from the outside of the scope as well. So, you know, you can see what's going on around you. And as a side benefit, if you pull the trigger before the scope's all the way up, you still see if you hit the enemy. To me, that's a huge benefit. And it's all due to the fact the screen doesn't go black before the scope is totally in your view. And if it takes you a while to bring the scope up to aim at an enemy, and by the time it comes up, the enemy has already moved out of the way, you'll be able to steer the scope into them because the screen isn't black, because you're actually looking at what you're aiming at instead of closing your eyes, taking a deep breath, and giving up a prayer to God. Once again, the community made a subpar mechanic into a much better one. Some of you might be thinking, but what about the balance?
Lig my balls.
Maybe they made the gameplay the way they did to balance the game. Listen, I'm saying, don't die on this hill. This is not a good hill to die on. No one closes both of their eyes when they aim down a fucking scope, okay? No one. And worse yet, it makes the game less fun to play, at least in my opinion. Why would you want to do that? Because I can tell you from firsthand experience that it made my experience much better. I really started to like this combat, but that's only after I installed the mod. What I'm saying is that there's many ways to balance gameplay, and you don't have to make your game intentionally less fun to do it. There's a reason why Deus Ex's shooting mechanics haven't been repeated in the new modern AAA titles. It may be a good simulation of a guy who's learning how to shoot a gun as he goes, but it's not fun to engage with, especially when you can't hit the broadside of a barn. When we're talking about shooting or swinging a sword or anything like that, when we're talking about an action game like an action RPG, like what this game is supposed to be, those actions are supposed to be about in the moment simulation, right? That's why Deus Ex's combat was done the way it was done. The problem is that Fallout 4's combat doesn't simulate anything from reality. I eventually made it to the settlement, and I remember it being very tense. Like, I was very careful the whole way through, especially since I had already died once trying to get there. The save mechanic really made me change the way I did things, the way I played it. It started to make it into a different game. There's not much to this place. The only reason you're there is to get another mission. So here's a question. This settlement has no means of contacting us. No radios, no radio tower, nothing. How did Garvey know they needed help?
And I hope you don't mind, but I've got another favor to ask.
I am once again asking for your
settlement that needs our help.
Is it because of that little radio he's got, like, pinned to his chest? I mean, is that the explanation? I mean, what radio towers is it bouncing off of? I've had to actually raise all the radio towers as I'm exploring, so, you know, how is he communicating with these people? Like, I get it. It's the Radiant Quest system, and it's an excuse to explore as if we needed one, but still, you gotta admit that your reasons for doing things and the reason you're able to do these things is a little underwritten, you know what I mean? Like vegan anemic.
We taught a lion to eat tofu.
Okay, now let's say for a moment that they do have a radio, they do have towers, and they are able to talk to Garvey. I'm fine with that, okay? I'm not gonna raise a big shitstorm about that, okay? But why is it that they don't tell Garvey what they need done, and then Garvey tells me? Why do I gotta go all the way across the map to talk to them first, and then have them send me somewhere, and then me come all the way back to them, and then go all the way back to Garvey to report in? You see what I'm saying? There's no purpose to it. It's just pointless busy work.
Anyway.
So I continued on, fought about 5 million mole rats, and eventually I found civilization, buildings rising out of the fog in a distance. And then I came to this building, and inside were a bunch of bedrooms. The inhabitants are all frozen in place in the same position they were in before the bombs dropped. And now all that remains is a carcass of vacationers, moms and dads. No children though. Odd. It's almost as if Bethesda is trying to say that the bombs were selective and they only killed adults. You do know that that's worse, right? You know, children starving to death in an irradiated wasteland.
Baking pies without an oven.
This is when I found my first magazine. And this is a change that I actually love. I love the way they did the collectibles in this game. I mean, there's actually a reason to go out and seek them out. In the previous games, I never used the magazines. In fact, it didn't even register to me that I had them, because there was probably a few points during the game where one of them would have came really in handy, but I just never found a use for them. These kinds of items, you tend to just forget about them, right? Because you have to consume them, you got to go into your menu, and that's kind of a pain in the ass. So it's better that these collectibles are passive. It's the same thing with the bobbleheads. Every time I find one of these, I get excited to see what I got. It's a great way to reward exploration, and is one of the changes I sincerely hope Bethesda keeps with future games. Now, I was real hesitant to sleep on these beds because the last couple of times I did that, I woke up with chiggers, which really sucked because I didn't have antibiotics. There's several different diseases and each one has its own remedy. But I felt forced to save because I really didn't want to lose all my progress because, you know, anybody can kill me at this point. I mean, a lucky headshot and I'm dead. And while I like the idea of you having to make a choice between saving more often or getting diseased more often, it doesn't really feel like it's a choice from time to time. I did some research to verify my claims and I found out that the game is constantly keeping tabs of your disease chance level, and different things affect that level and add to it. So for instance, you could do something that will make the game auto roll to see if you get a disease, right? So like drinking dirty water, eating uncooked food, that kind of thing can force a roll on you. If your disease level is high enough and you go to sleep, it will then also roll to see if you get a disease while you're sleeping. So I went into my menu to see if I could see what my disease chance was. And you probably won't be surprised to hear this, but guess what? It's not in there. They didn't add anything about disease chance to the menus. This is probably a personal preference thing, but when I'm taking a chance doing something that might severely limit my ability to survive, I want to know what my chances are. So in new Bethesda fashion, they've hidden the chance so I can't really make an informed decision. I had a pretty tense gunfight with some raiders who had set up some turrets which forced me to make good use of cover, and again, the fight felt tense because of the save mechanic. By the time I had gotten there, I had found so many supplies, done so many things, that dying would have felt pretty bad. But I was rewarded with ammo and experience, and then I got to the city proper. First thing I ran into was an entire horde of zombies fighting with raiders. I watched them for a while, letting them kill each other, while taking pot shots at the raiders to hasten their demise. Then I retreated into the nearest building to wait out the caution timer, but the game had other ideas.
Oh shit, here we go again.
And just when I thought I had it handled, more of them came around the corner. If it weren't for VATS pausing and giving me time to think, I don't think I would have been able to survive this encounter. Then I go exploring, which I really shouldn't have done. And what happens?
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get in.
That, okay. And that's kind of how these runs go. It's tense, and sometimes it's a good kind of tense, a challenging kind of tense, and sometimes it's bullshit.
Anyway,
I tried this shit 3 more times. The second time I tried, I missed 2 consecutive 66% headshots because I hit an imaginary wall? I don't know, you look at this and tell me. I don't know what the fuck this is. which is a problem with this sort of real-time turn-based shit that they do in this game, but I digress. Then I missed all of my aim shots because for some reason that I never noticed before, aiming into a sighted weapon adds this weird-ass delay over everything, and that delay really screws with me. Say you're aiming for the head. You're going to sweep that mouse across the landscape until you see somebody's head. Then you're going to try and stop that crosshair on that person's head, but after you stop moving the mouse, the crosshairs keep moving for a little while. That's because they were late moving in the first place. Notice when I move the mouse, the crosshairs don't start moving yet. So now the crosshairs have to catch up to the mouse later on. Then you add sway onto that. It makes aiming a chore, it's stupid. On the second try I was getting hung up constantly with weird collision meshes. Now see, normally when I fire a weapon, I look to the front of the gun, right? Right there's a little hole, that's where bullets come out of. It's called a barrel, right? If there's nothing in front of my barrel, I'm figuring, yeah, that bullet's got a clear line of sight right to the enemy. But I'm wrong. Sometimes the collision meshes are a little bigger than the objects that they surround, right? So you can end up pumping a full clip into the side of a car, which is a really bad idea because them things blow up. And in most cases, the collision meshes are not significantly complex enough to account for curves. So you may think that you're shooting over cover, but you're actually shooting the collision mesh. It's really hard to tell if you hit cover or if the bullet whizzed past the enemy's head because of the cone of fire RNG stuff. And I get it that some of these meshes cannot be as complex as they need to be. Like for cars, for instance, those are the #1 offenders in my opinion. They have the worst collision meshes in the game. I always seem to be shooting the car and not the thing in front of me. The collision mesh doesn't need to be more detailed, just don't leave edges of the mesh hanging outside of the object. The third run, ironically, ended when a bullet phase shifted through a wall and killed me. This is again a problem with the collision meshes. You see these edges of the window? Those aren't collisions. You can shoot right through them. You know, I feel like if I can't see the barrel of your gun through a wall, I shouldn't get hit by a bullet from it. You know? Line of sight and all that. The fourth run was when I started getting frustrated and avoided most conflicts. I snuck everywhere and healed often, sticking to cover whenever possible. I took no unnecessary chances. I learned a very valuable lesson from all those deaths. I learned that you're not supposed to start fights when you're weak. That's a lesson I should have learned in high school, but you know, here we are. I also took the time to do things I wouldn't have normally done, like reactivate this Securitron bot. I let him take on the boss and the rest of the raiders, and for his effort, I killed him with his turret buddies. I didn't, however, rest on those beds because I didn't want to risk an infection, though in retrospect, I probably should have. The final moments of this mission were the most tense, right? Because I didn't save, because I didn't want to get an infection, right? And in a way, that design made me make a decision that increased my enjoyment, but also my tension, also my stress, right? Because the whole time at the end, when I'm having to fight my way back out of the building, I'm just sitting there thinking the whole time, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die. Because I don't want to go back to the beginning. I do not want to do all this over again. All the way back to the settlement, I was over careful, avoiding every fight, and praying that VATS would find whatever landmines or hidden enemies might be lurking in the tall grass. And at the end, I made it back, turned in my mission, and saved the game. I took a huge sigh of relief, because the idea of doing all that over again was not appetizing. And that's why I like this save system so much. The tension, the fear of loss that this system generates, and most of all, how it changes the way you play the game entirely, is why I like this system and why I didn't mod it out. In fact, I started building my entire character around those mechanics, focusing on stealth and suppressors for my weapons so I didn't break stealth as easily. It's not without its problems, but it does a decent job at what it's trying to do. It's just a shame that there's a mess surrounding everything that takes attention away from survival mode and what it does. The Birth of Venus would be a totally different painting if Venus was surrounded by a bunch of full cat litter boxes, you know what I mean? Though it does shine a light on why the mode doesn't work real well in a game like Fallout 4. I mean, I like difficult games as much as the next weeb, but there's a difference between S&M and waterboarding, you know what I mean? Like when you leave a settlement and immediately get hit with a Molotov cocktail from who knows where from someone who is apparently able to manipulate the Matrix and re-enable Molotovs even when I disabled them. So can you survive survival? It's doable. I just didn't want to spend an hour in a mission and die due to a bug or a Molotov, and then have to repeat the process 4 or 5 times. Games that are designed for this sort of difficulty curve will space out the checkpoint opportunities at a reasonable rate. And if you have to start over, it doesn't take that long to get where you were, and you retain the information about why you lost and how you could do it better next time. So it also helps you learn how to be better at the game. In Fallout 4, when you spend 20 minutes walking to a place, then 20 minutes in mission, only to die at the end, you don't learn anything aside from where the enemies are, and when you have to do all that shit over again, and all that downtime walking from place to place after you die has a tendency to make you forget what you just learned. And to make things worse, Fallout 4 stacks systems that actively prevent you from wanting to sleep and save. The system would have benefited from having the one way that you're able to save your game be the only safe place in the game. Instead, the game gives you HIV when you sleep, and when you wake up, it's already full-blown AIDS. So I found myself not saving as often as I should, because I didn't want to catch herpes from a dirty mattress and have to spend 300 caps on a remedy, or spend several levels getting the ability to make antibiotics, then falling behind on the power curve. In closing, survival's awesome, but the execution's a little haphazard. It's like the second album from your favorite band, you know? You try listening to it once, and it's so different from the last album that you hate it at first, but then one day you make an effort to listen to the whole thing, you really listen, you stop doing everything you were doing and just stare into the window on the front of your boombox and watch the little white prong cylinder turn, you pay attention and you appreciate it, and suddenly it's your new favorite album. That's what Fallout 4 Survival is to me. It's the best game mode to play because it makes all the systems in Fallout 4 feel like they have a purpose. Unlike the vanilla normal experience, you have to fix it with mods unless you're the type of person who likes it when women tug on his balls violently. And look, I ain't putting you down, I'm just saying, you gotta be a certain type of person to enjoy that. I mean, I'm the type of guy where if a girl's like way too into sex and she's hurting me, I'm gonna say something. You know what I mean? I'm kind of a bitch that way. They took every system one step too far in my opinion. I love the save system, but I hate that you can't fast travel. And it wasn't enough to limit how much you can save. They could have stopped right there and I would have been begrudgingly okay with it. But it's like they just couldn't resist. They had to add making you sick when you sleep. They added grenades and gave it its own contextual keybind. Cool, great, I love grenades. But you also added Molotovs, and I love Molotovs. When they're not used on me. It's an unwritten rule, but I am the player. It's okay for me to do cheesy shit to your AI, but it's not okay for the AI to do cheesy shit to me. In closing, we could really use a mod that lets you tweak the survival options, so... Oh. Alright, never mind, carry on.
People awoke from the American dream.
I started this video because I, like many people I surveyed on Twitter, just couldn't get into Fallout 4 Survival when it released. Many stated it was frustrating or boring or tedious, stating specifically that walking to places you've already been just to die when you're almost there made them rage quit. I get that. That's what this entire video has been about. But now, I'm about to tell you how to make Fallout 4 your GIMP. I started off this build with rifles. That was a mistake because rifles, at least the powerful ones early game, are slow, hard to aim, and you don't get a whole lot of ammo, and they don't do well in tight spaces like indoor areas. I really wasted a lot of time on that build. But then I saw a guy on Twitch doing the same build I was doing, except he was using a 10mm pistol. Okay, color me intrigued. I decided to try it for myself. The channel name is VREXIA, and I'll put a link to this channel in the description. He does a no-hit run in Fallout 4, it's insane. Let's start with stats, and strength you're going to want a 6. You want it at this level because you want to increase your carry weight, right? Because carry weight's a very important stat here in this game, especially in survival, because you're going to be picking up a lot of typewriters. You also get access to armor, and armor is a really good skill that you should not sleep on. You should take this skill immediately so you could start making shadowed armor. I'm going to show you how with shadowed armor you can take out an entire camp of raiders before they even realize you're there. It's stupidly powerful and probably the best armor in the game. Perception is a useless stat for this build, so don't put any points into it. Perception only affects your ability to hit in VATS, lockpicking, and stealing, and we're not going to be using VATS for anything other than to use up a critical that we got banked. And criticals automatically hit, so we don't even need perception for that. I'm still a bit iffy on endurance. See, I put a bunch of points into it because I wanted high survivability, but I'm not exactly sure it actually helped me survive anything. And since this build is all about killing people before they know that you're there, you're not going to be taking damage, so what's the point of endurance, right? And since endurance grants you HP based on your level retroactively, that means we can use it as a dump stat later, and it'll grant us that much more HP. And in the meantime, we can stack damage instead of having to waste points on endurance. The only perk we care about is the damage resistance, and even then you might not need to take that, but I always do for that little bit of extra survivability. But honestly, this build would work better if you bought Bloody Mess instead. That extra damage is really helpful. Charisma is, unfortunately, a good line for survival. Tier 3 gets you Lone Wanderer. At level 3 you get a boost to your damage, and 25% is nothing to sneeze at. Then there's Local Leader, which people tell me is very useful, and I guess it is. Settlement building is even more useful in vanilla. People tell me Local Leader's good, but I don't really know why, to be honest. I mean, I know it sets up supply routes, and there's a whole big problem with the supply routes, but really, when you set up shops at the max level, it's like, all it does is really give you a place to sell your shit. And at least in my playthrough, they never stocked anything good. But there's actually a different use for it, and I really didn't realize this. Like, supply lines are good, right? Because they allow you to get your workshop materials so you can build more comfortable settlements everywhere. What I didn't consider is that at each of these camps you could set up shops as well. And that is very useful, because in the time it takes you to go from one place to the next, a lot of things can happen. You can get a disease, you can run out of food, all kinds of things can happen. So this allows you to do that without a whole lot of fucking around. It's great. This is a very important skill that I highly recommend you take, and you use it better than I did. But here's the thing, just like with everything in this game, you know, it gives and it takes away, you know what I mean? For every good thing, there's a bad reaction. It's yin and yang over there at Bethesda. Supply lines are good because it allows you to get your supplies, right? But if you put bullets, guns, water, anything like that inside of the supply shop, those supplies don't get transferred from place to place, which calls into question, why the hell do we have supply lines in the first place if they're not going to deliver all the supplies that I might need? You get access to building materials, but that's it. Intelligence is at 6 because of science and gun nut, as well as scrapper for obvious reasons. Science, I'm mixed on this. I have never once used my power armor after I used it to kill the Deathclaw in the beginning of the game, and I don't know that I ever will. So you might want to save that point and put it into luck for more crits, and to get yourself closer to Idiot Savant. Or you could dump all those points into agility, which is by far the smarter investment. Agility opens up the Gunslinger perk, Sneak, Mr. Sandman, and Ninja. These are the most important perks in the game for our build. Prioritize Sneak and Gunslinger, then take Ninja when you have Shadowed Armor, and Mr. Sandman when you have gotten yourself a pistol with a silencer. You can two-shot a super mutant with a silenced 38 pipe pistol when you stack these perks. As for luck, I didn't take it because I didn't really need it, but I think it'll likely be a dump stat for late game. Now this is where we talk about armor. Armor is stupidly important, and weight is not as important as the mod you're using. Shadowed Armor is one of the best choices for this build. Why? Shadows cause the enemy to go temporarily blind. The best way I can explain this is, like, do you remember Chameleon and how powerful Chameleon was? You know, not being able to be seen at 100% ever? Yeah, that's what Fallout 4 does with this, except it only does it in the shadows. And the result is that they accidentally created Thief with guns. I'm serious. Give it a try, you'll find out. It is the most incredible thing I've seen in an action game. And when I started using it, I was stunned that Bethesda thought to make this thing something that you could do, and in fact, it gave me a whole new respect for the game. The same way I felt about Underrail when everything started clicking. People shit on this game all the time for the bugs, and they're right to do so, but they shit on it more for the quests and the RPG element. Where this game really shines is in the combat simulation. It's addictive, and I haven't felt this way about sneaking in a video game in a long time because it gets what it does right. Think about it. If someone was shooting at you from the shadows, it'd be pretty hard to shoot back at them, wouldn't it? Because when you're standing in a lighted area, like a bright area, like right in the sun, your pupils are dilated, which means it's letting in less light. Which means if someone's hiding in the shadows somewhere, you're not going to see them, especially if they have black armor on. That's what this game gets right. It makes it possible to cosplay as Leon the Professional. Here's how this works. You always stick to the shadows and you only go out at night. You want to keep your distance from enemies and aim center mass. You don't need headshots for this to work. And with the accuracy in this game kind of being a joke, you don't want to risk alerting enemies when a bullet whizzes past their head because the RNG gods are fickle. I've also found a way to avoid the whole scope sway bullshit. At distance, you always aim zoomed out because it's actually easier, at least for me, to aim. It's faster and it seems to result in way more rapid fire one-shots than the alternative, which is to slowly scan down sights for targets or wait for them to walk into your crosshairs. When you've got the crosshairs aim center mass, quick scope and fire. Repeat this process for every enemy you see that isn't in cover. This is also a good way to get headshots when they're in cover because chances are they'll always pop out of the cover the same way, so you can predict the headshots. But like I said before, don't bother with those. For every shot you land, you'll do about 3.7 times more damage, and at level 23 I was one-shotting super mutants with high level raiders and killing raiders in power armor fairly quickly. I had a 10mm pistol that did 25% extra damage for 86 damage a shot, and with 3.7 times damage giving me roughly 300 damage per shot, that shit was a monster that I used to melt the Mirelurk Queen. Well, not melt, but you get my idea. If I had gotten her while still in stealth and at night, her shit would have went bye-bye. But I engaged in the daytime, which is a no-no. Never go out in the daytime. So what you do is you sit back in the shadows, pop a shot. You'll either one-shot the enemy or two-shot. Fire 2 shots just to be safe every time. Then everyone will be in a cautious status. This is fine. You still get the sneak attack bonus and caution. Danger is what you want to avoid. And so long as you stay in shadow, the enemy can't see you until they're within 5 feet of you. I mean, they almost have to be on top of you to see you. They'll come looking for you, but chances are if you keep moving in a different direction, they'll walk right past you. It really makes you feel like a gun-toting ninja. Because of this AI behavior, every shot you fire at them will do sneak attack damage. If they're ranged, this is even better because while melee enemies will run up to you in a straight line, begging to be shot, ranged characters will fire in your general direction and very likely never hit you because they know where the bullets are coming from, but not where you are specifically. This build takes Fallout 4 and paddles its ass. Best yet, if you get discovered and the enemy starts filling you with lead, run away and engage stealth. Wait for a little while until the enemy forgets that they've been shot and start the process all over again. Just make sure that before you engage an enemy, you have some place to escape to. Then the rest is up to your imagination. Start settlements, have a goal. Do you want the largest building in the wasteland? Perhaps you want to build a fortified settlement made of the rarest materials so you could show off to all the other settlements you let starve to build your legacy. It's a great game when the combat isn't fishhooking you. So if you're like me and at some point you just kind of gave up on Fallout 4 survival because it was either too hard or you just didn't like the mechanics or you didn't like how they executed some things, well, you can make the game into a different game through modding. I made mine into Splinter Cell, and that's really the value of Bethesda games. They fulfill the unfulfillable goal of giving everyone a chance to mod it and make it into the game that they want it to be. Or it gives 12-year-olds a way to see titties.